welcome to the DC Chamber of Commerce's 2011 Policy Forum and Legislative Reception. I am Gina Adams, Chair of the DC Chamber, and I am honored to welcome you to this exciting event. This is our third annual Policy Forum. Because so many of you provided us with such positive feedback about our prior sessions, we have decided to make this event part of our annual programming each year. Before I introduce our forum hosts, I'd like to thank our Policy Forum sponsor, Pfizer. Pfizer continues to be a valued partner in the district and a critical stakeholder in our ongoing effort to find real solutions for treatment and prevention of diseases and to encourage healthier living in our community. Pfizer is the largest biopharmaceutical company in the world. Most of us know it as an industry leader in developing innovative medicines for human use. But they also produce medicines for animals, nutritional products, and many of the world's best-known consumer products, including Advil products, Anbesol, Caltrate, Centrum, and of course, Viagra. To further secure its place in our lives as a healthcare company and a great corporate citizen, Pfizer also continues its invaluable service to our community through a number of programs that benefit the underinsured and the uninsured. For example, its cutting-edge Maintain program is a unique patient assistance program that helps Washingtonians who lost their jobs and prescription drug coverage on or after January 1, 2009, and who are in financial need, continue to get their Pfizer medicine free of charge for up to 12 months or until they become insured. Pfizer also gave nearly 1,000 underinsured and uninsured DC residents 2,500 free prescriptions worth more than $500,000 in savings on prescription medicines in 2010 alone. These programs combine to give Pfizer the largest and most extensive set of patient assistance programs in the United States, offering more than 70 medicines free of charge to patients in need. Now, I don't have enough time to tell you about all of the ways Pfizer serves our community, but I can tell you that they are a model for the rest of us. Through their commitment and ability to create and sustain innovative public-private partnerships that deliver positive health outcomes for DC residents. These relationships include participation in the Mayor's and DC Department of Health's Live Well DC Community Coalition and the Keep It Moving campaign for senior health and wellness with the Department of Parks and Recreation. Of particular note in our disproportionately ravaged community is Pfizer's involvement with the Mayor, the DC Department of Health, and the Global Business Coalition on HIV/AIDS. Its purpose is to raise awareness and urge regular testing among city residents when they seek medical care. On the political front, Pfizer supports public policies that promote increased access to affordable, quality health care and responsible use of health information technology. As we acknowledge and thank them for their exemplary corporate citizenship and their sponsorship today, they've only asked that I convey one message to all of us: see your doctor regularly, eat healthy, stay active, And if your healthcare provider gives you a medicine, remember to take it. Let's thank Pfizer. I'd also like to thank our legislative reception sponsor, Kaiser Foundation Health Plan of the Mid-Atlantic States. Kaiser Permanente of the Mid-Atlantic States region provides and coordinates complete healthcare services for almost 500,000 members through 30 medical centers in Maryland, Washington, D.C., and Virginia. Their work over the past year speaks volumes to the commitment they have made to the region, and particularly Washington. I could not possibly list everything they have done, but to give you a taste of what they have achieved, in January, they opened their new medical facility, the Kaiser Permanente Capitol Hill Medical Center. The new center, staffed by approximately 400 employees and physicians, which offers members state-of-the-art health care and maximum convenience, all supported by industry-leading technology and information systems. The medical center is equipped with digital signage technology that enhances the member experience while reinforcing preventive care resources. And as if a new medical center was not enough, Kaiser unveiled a new generation of the mobile health vehicle designed to mirror a small medical center on wheels. The state-of-the-art mobile health vehicle is equipped with computers and wired with Kaiser Permanente's electric health record system. The mobile health vehicle will bring electronic care support services and connectivity directly to members at a number of venues throughout the region. In addition to the real-time update capabilities, the mobile health team can conduct video consultation with caregivers and specialists. This exemplifies how coordinating healthcare and leveraging the power of advanced information technologies allows Kaiser Permanente's mobile health team to achieve superior quality outcomes. Kaiser Permanente has also been honored with a regional breastfeeding-friendly workplace award from the District of Columbia Breastfeeding Coalition in recognition of the supportive work environment provided to its employees, and have partnered with social services agencies in Wards 7 and 8 to actively address childhood obesity in Washington. In 2010, Kaiser's charitable contributions topped $35 million. Approximately $25 million was used for direct medical care and insurance coverage for uninsured and underinsured residents of our region, and another $10 million in grants, donations, and sponsorships went to organizations that support the health of this region. Great things are happening in Washington, and Kaiser is at the forefront, working in partnership to make Washington, D.C. a healthier place to live, work, and play. Let's thank Kaiser. And now I'd like to invite our host for the Policy Forum, Pfizer's Senior Director of National Government Relations and Multicultural Affairs, Melissa Bishop Murphy, to the podium.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Welcome to the D.C. Chamber of Commerce's 2011 Health Policy Forum, making Washington, D.C. a healthier place to do business. I would like to add my thanks to Gina and Gina's thanks to the gold, silver, and bronze event sponsors, and you'll find them listed in the event program. Their sponsorship demonstrates their commitment and support to make DC a healthier place to live. Now, due to the economy, the past few years have been difficult for many Washington metro area businesses. As the dust settles, a new economic era is emerging. To ensure that we are ready to meet and embrace the changes that await our economy, we all must work together. We must make smart choices that prepare us to capitalize on our strengths in the new economy. The purpose of today's discussion is to outline a framework for becoming a model healthy city. Thank you to the Chamber, the Mayor, local businesses, and healthcare leaders for gathering here today. We look forward to a dynamic panel discussion and hope to gain real insight into solutions to make DC one of the healthiest places to live and work. So let me introduce our panel. They include Chester Burrell, President and CEO of Care First Blue Cross Blue Shield. Suzanne Day Moret, 2011 President of the Washington, D.C. Association of Realtors. Carl Hairston, Regional Manager of Capital Region M&T Bank. Curtis Etherly, Jr., Public Affairs and Communications, Mid-Atlantic, Coca-Cola Bottling Company. Antoine Ford, President, Enlighten, Inc. John Rockwood, President of the National Rehabilitation Hospital, MedStar Health. Dr. Doug Guthrie, Dean of the George Washington University School of Business. And Dr. Tamara Foreman, Howard University College of Pharmacy, Co-Director of Experiential Programs. And to moderate our discussion for today, we have one of Washington's leading political minds and civic champions, our very own Mayor Vincent C. Gray. Mayor Gray has tirelessly advocated for the residents of the district for more than 30 years. His dedication to children and their families has been the hallmark of his service in both city government and the nonprofit sector. His lifetime of public service to the district can be best summed up by a singular governing philosophy, that the District of Columbia works best as one city. After a very successful term as council chairman and many years of public, private, and nonprofit service, on January 2nd, 2011, Vincent C. Gray was sworn in as the 7th mayor of the District of Columbia. Prior to his inauguration as mayor, he served as chairman of the Council of the District of Columbia and as council member for Ward 7. No stranger to health care, Mayor Gray served as director of the D.C. Department of Human Services. During his campaign for mayor, he pledged to continue uniting the district by focusing on job creation and economic development, a collaborative approach to school reform, safer streets in our neighborhoods, and restoring fiscal responsibility to city government. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to welcome our moderator for the afternoon, the Mayor of the District of Columbia, the Honorable Vincent C. Gray.
Thank you very much for such a nice introduction, and I'm delighted to be here with the Chamber of Commerce and with such a distinguished panel. And we're going to make this interactive throughout rather than have presentations. And then at the end of this, we'll have an opportunity for each of you to pose your questions as well when we come to that point. You know, I'm reminded constantly by the Chamber that we are 51 out of 51 in terms of the receptivity to doing business in the District of Columbia. Actually, I wish we were 51 out of 51. That means we would be a state. All too often, I think we are compared, you know, when there is a not necessarily favorable comparison to be drawn, we become a state for those purposes. And it wasn't the chamber that did this, it was another group that did these rankings. But be that as it may, however people want to characterize us, we want to be, we want to get better and better and better. Actually, I was at an event today where we'll talk a little bit about a green economy, but we actually are, in terms of LEED certified buildings, as well as LEED certified square footage, we are at or near the top in the nation in those environmental indices. So whether you want to compare us to being a state or a city in those instances, we have achieved a great deal. And we need to do that on the healthcare front and certainly on the economic development front as well. We want to put a sign at the Virginia line, at the Maryland line that says the District of Columbia is open for business. And we want people to flock here because they see the opportunity for us to be able to do that. It was interesting to listen to the presentation about Pfizer and about Kaiser. That rhymes, doesn't it? Pfizer and Kaiser. Yeah, that'd be a great company. Maybe we should merge. In any event, there were some health indicators that were cited. And I think it's kind of a double entendre for today's discussion. In the narrow sense, we want to focus on health issues, but we also want to focus on how we create a healthy economy and also create a healthy workforce in the District of Columbia. There was mention of the HIV/AIDS epidemic in the District of Columbia, and really it can only be characterized as that. 3% of our population has the virus, and the national average is 1%. It means that we have over 15,000 people who are HIV positive in the District of Columbia, and it's going to take us a while to get out of that. We just launched about 2 weeks ago a very bold initiative, Treatment on Demand, and the purpose of that, frankly, obviously, is for those who are identified as being HIV positive to feel that they can reach out to us to get treatment. But also we know that with the improvements in pharmacology in today's society, it really has the effect of reducing to some extent the presence of the virus in one's bloodstream, and followed in a strict regimen can actually reduce the risk of transmitting the virus. We also know that there are other programs. We hope to be able to continue our needle exchange program in the District of Columbia and hope that there are no social riders that are placed on our budget that would somehow proscribe us from being able to do that. And also, obviously, diminishing to the extent we can the extent to which people engage in risky behavior. In addition to that, we seem to have almost any index you look at, heart disease, cancer, hypertension, kidney, really are extremely high in the District of Columbia. And even more so when you go east, when you go to Wards 7 and 8, you find that those conditions are more prevalent in those communities than virtually any other in the District of Columbia. And obviously is a cause for concern to us to, one, get at the bottom of why, and then what do we do about it? Because that has implications then for a healthy workforce, which is the other part of our discussion today. So our discussion will focus on how we create a more healthy population in the District of Columbia. How do we attack problems like poor nutrition and insufficient physical activity on the part of many people, and then obesity as a result of that. And then how do we grow our city? How do we expand our tax base? How do we prepare more residents for jobs? As we look at the western end of the city, our unemployment rate is around 3 or 4%. On the eastern end, it rises to as much as 30%, and that is completely and totally unacceptable, obviously. So the real question is, how do we help this city reach its full potential? And that's what we want to hear from the panel about today. It's going to be hard, I think, to get every panel member to answer every question. And you certainly are welcome to jump in. If you hear a response that you think you'd like to respond to, please do so. And I want to thank this large audience for coming today, because it must have been mighty difficult to resist turning on your television and watching March Madness, which started last night and continues today. And just on a note in terms of economic development, I am delighted that we are hosting games at the Verizon Center. We had 4 games yesterday, and we'll have 2 games tomorrow. And frankly, in the interest of our city, I hope, one, it attracted a lot of people to the city, and I hope they spend every dime that they have. And in addition to that, we take checks, we take credit cards, and given the state of our budget at this stage, I'm willing to take an IOU from a retired person. Let me start with a broad question, and I'll start with Chet, and then we'll just go around from there. What do you all think? You know, each of you has your own field. What do you think should be the economic priorities where we can attract investments in the District of Columbia? We know we are a government town. We know we've been advantaged by that with the federal government and with our own government, and we probably always will be. We know that tourism and hospitality is a critical part of what we do in this city. But at the same time, you know, I know we should expand that base so that we aren't vulnerable to changes in one of those two areas that really have the effect of attacking our economy and our revenue base in the city. We've seen the ill effects of that over the last 3 years as we've entered a recession that has taken down our revenue by hundreds of millions of dollars. We now have an opportunity going forward, I think, to broaden that rather than just simply look at cuts as a way of doing it. How do we then identify what those economic priorities ought to be in the District of Columbia and move forward in concert, public and private sector together, in order to be able to effectuate what we decide would be areas to move in? So we'll start with you, Chet.
Okay.
And by the way, before you do, is everybody aware that we have about 30,000 jobs in healthcare in the District of Columbia? It's one of the largest employer industries in this city, and not a lot of people realize that.
That is true, Mr. Mayor. We ourselves have about 1,200 jobs here in the district, $100 million a year payroll. The district has a tremendous amount to offer. We're certainly proud and pleased to be here in the numbers that we're here. We cover tens of thousands of people from an insurance standpoint. I would say this, that the cost of doing business in the district, and the topic maybe that is the focal point of today, after payroll, for us as an employer, and I think for most others, the cost of health care is the second most important item of expense. And the cost today of covering a family of 4 in the district, and we as an employer experience this ourselves, is something bordering on $20,000 a year for a standard insurance program for a family of 4. And when you ask why is it so expensive, you touched on some of the factors earlier. In many of the employers that we survey, the level of obesity in the employment base is something bordering on 70% overweight or obese. And with that comes diabetes, heart disease, and a series of other chronic conditions. And if there's anything that can be done to cut down the level of obesity, raising awareness and fitness, better diet, and what we're very interested in doing is looking at whether in the way that you can get a safe driver credit on a car policy, can you get a monetary reward for living a healthier lifestyle. I want to put one statistic that always hits me in perspective, which is of all the people we serve in this community, tens of thousands of people, 5% of them have multiple chronic disease, and they explain 30 to 40% of all of the medical spending that goes on.
Okay, let me bring you back, though, to where we want to take this, and that is we realize that the federal sector is a huge part of our employer base in the city. We realize hospitality and tourism is a huge part of that. But where do we expand from there? Are you suggesting that we should expand our presence in healthcare, or are there other endeavors that this city ought to look at to be able to expand the revenue base?
We're largely a service economy.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that I see that changing. But in order to attract service businesses...
What services would they be? And I'm not going to focus on...
Financial services, legal, all the things that spin around professional services that in some way or another are often connected to government in one way or the other.
Antoine Ford, why don't you weigh in on that one?
I think if you look at some of the services that we have, and this is really going back to the other issue of employability, some of the largest contractors in the area that do business both locally and the federal government don't exist in D.C. They're located around. And so if we look at how to encourage them getting into areas such as the cybersecurity area, we got cloud computing. We're talking about the medical health information exchange. Right now, that's one of the biggest issues if you look at what's happening between DOD and the Department of Veteran Affairs. They're trying to say, how do we share health information? And so these are some of the issues that we face about sharing medical information that's not being tackled today by local businesses.
Both of you have gone to healthcare as the answer to that question. I'm not suggesting it's not accurate, hardly. But is that where we should put our chips down to say this is where we want to expand? We think there are going to be more jobs in this area. Is that what we should do to expand the economy beyond hospitality, tourism, and the federal sector in the city?
Well, I think I would honestly, maybe a self-serving being a technology company, but I would look at the technology industry a little bit more because the technology industry.
We use technology often as a term. What would we say to these folks out here and with more precision about how we should pursue technology as an expansion of our economy?
Well, let's look at how we use, how many people today have a BlackBerry, an iPhone, an iPad?
I've actually got 3.
You got 3? And so if we look at businesses that are able to look at how do we make business in this city via technology? How do we offer services via technology? How do we ensure that the business of this city, everything that we do, can be enabled via technology? And we need more of the service sectors. In the federal sector, they're doing it. They're doing it quite quickly and honestly, but we don't have those businesses here. And we need to encourage those businesses with tax incentives, employability to actually locate in this city.
You have the daunting task at George Washington University, an outstanding institution, I might add. You have the daunting task, Doug, of looking at training people for careers in business and being able to connect them with a city that they hopefully will work in. So where do you see our opportunities to expand this economy?
The first thing I would say is that, first of all, I really commend the framing of the question as really thinking about cross-industry strategic industrial development. But I want to disagree a little bit with the idea that we should be moving away from manufacturing. We are fundamentally a services economy. As you mentioned, of course, the government procurement is a $67 billion business in this area. It's got a lot of richness to it. But there are 2 areas that I would like to see the district move in the direction of, and I'm going to use 2 other cities as examples that have worked very well in this sector. Let me preface this by saying the reason I think we can't walk away from manufacturing is when you cite statistics of the 30% of unemployment in Ward 7 or 8, these are people that I think would do well and benefit tremendously from actually having a manufacturing sector move back to the city. And there are cities that have done well in rebuilding themselves in new manufacturing areas. So the first that you mentioned was healthcare. Now, the city of Pittsburgh, after it was decimated from the loss of steel jobs in the 1970s and 1980s, they looked around the city and saw what was the largest employer in the city. It happened to be the University of Pittsburgh Health Center. But they didn't seek to build a city that was built around doctors. They sought to build a city that was built around the ancillary industries that support that. So they built in areas of healthcare technologies, of healthcare machinery, of robotics, in areas that were actually manufacturing jobs that would then support that thriving industry. Those are jobs, they're skilled labor jobs, so we would need to invest in vocational education to get people there, but they're really important jobs to build an economy around.
Where do we do that? Where do we make those investments in? I'll call it career and technical education, so we have 21st century technology. But you're absolutely right, it is vocational education, vocational training. Where in the city should that happen?
I mean, I believe that it should happen where the joblessness is suffering the greatest amount of pain. People need training in Wards 7 and 8.
Who in a leadership capacity to make that happen?
Well, I mean, I think the DC Community College probably has the ability to take a leadership role on that, but it needs to be a much more concerted effort that has high-level thinking at the policy level for high school education, because I think vocational education has to occur at the high school. And I would just caution on the use of career training, because vocational technical education has replaced vocational education, because I think that there was a movement in the 70s and 80s to make that move, but a lot of what was lost was the actual skilled labor training in high schools at that time. The one other city, I like your referring earlier to renewable energy. I think the city of Chicago has done a great job at attracting Excelon and SunPower to actually build photovoltaic arrays in the south side of Chicago that created a tremendous amount of jobs, not just in the building of those arrays, but also in the service and maintenance of them. And so I actually think that that LEED certified buildings are great, but we could be building a manufacturing sector in this space and really become a leader in the national economy.
Where do we do that in the city with so little land mass?
I mean, here again, I would assume that there is enough land base in places in parts of the city where the joblessness is suffering the most, and so I would think east of the river would be a great opportunity to develop some of those areas, and it would bring jobs and services to that economy.
Banks are always looking to invest, right, Carl? Or are they? I would love to hear from you in light of this discussion, that we've just had with Chet, with Antoine, and with Doug, talking about areas of expansion. Banks have to have a vision for where they want to put their investors' money. From M&T's perspective and your own, perspective as a professional in the field, what do you see as expansion opportunities that would attract the investment of our financial industries?
I would definitely look at, if you look at everything that we have around us from government and everything that spawns off from that, there's enormous opportunities that present themselves for banks in this geography. So whether that's, being that at this point, like Chet said, we are a service-based environment, there's so many opportunities that spawn from that. So financing for government contractors, there are a couple of manufacturers in the area. I can think of one off the top of my head that's trying to grow and trying to expand in the city in an area where it is a higher level of unemployment. So I think it's easier for banks. It's interesting. It's easier for banks to finance those businesses that have those hard assets like manufacturers than it is typically to finance your service-oriented businesses. So typically, historically, it's been easier to finance those types of entities than it is to finance your service-oriented businesses, because banks want collateral. And the equipment, the materials, the inventory is the collateral, in essence, that you're financing. So it's much easier to finance those types of businesses than it historically has been service types of businesses.
Are banks looking to be leaders in terms of helping to define the future expansion of the economy here or elsewhere? Or are banks saying, let us know what's hot and we'll think about investing in that, in essence, following or leading?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, that's an interesting question. I think if a bank is really going to be committed to a geography, the only way that they're going to be successful in that geography is if that community is successful. So those banks should be playing a role in trying to help define where those opportunities are. I mean, because there's no secret, banks are in it to make a profit.
Clearly.
And, finance, extend financing that they can ultimately get repaid on. So I think if you look at it from that perspective, you should be engaged. I was talking with Barbara. I want to find a way, because when I look at this economy and service-oriented businesses, and specifically in the District of Columbia, we do have to have other avenues to couple with bank financing to make a lot of this work.
Like what?
Well, if I think about other geographies where I've been in, from a banking standpoint, we need to have, I think about a program in upstate New York where they have what they call a 65-35 program. And if you look at the District of Columbia, for example, and some of the residents, the biggest challenge that they'll have in securing bank financing is they need the equity injection. So the District of Columbia needs to have something that's available to basically fill that gap from an equity injection. And if you look at this recent economy and how it's impacted, you know, residents across the country and in the District of Columbia, a lot of people were really able to make a lot of advancements in moving their businesses forward and accessing capital because they leveraged the equity that was in their homes. Well, that's not going to be to the same degree that it was in 05, 06, 07.
Some people leveraged equity that wasn't there also, right?
Well, yeah, and you got a lot of banks that are not around because of it. You know, but if you really think about it, now that's an area that I see that the District of Columbia can definitely play a role, in particular with its residents, to help them find and secure and access capital. So if the banks can come in and finance their portion, and then if there's a role where the borrowers, I still believe that the borrower should come with some equity. They should have some stake, they should have some skin in the game, and then if the district has a program, a vehicle, an avenue that helps fill that gap, then you can see more opportunities start to happen.
What is M&T's perspective on what look like excellent opportunities for investment to grow the economy in the city?
Well, we clearly see, if you look at professional services, and how I define that and how we define that is whether it's doctors, whether it's lawyers, whether it's architects, whether it's healthcare professionals, we see huge explosive growth in that area. Obviously, our name is manufacturers and traders. We love manufacturing. We wish there were more because it's a great area. But with that being said, really looking at the professional services, you know, in all different kinds of services, but then we just figure out how can we finance them in the ways that we're not comfortable. How do you get comfortable? And typically, we find a way through the SBA to do it.
Suzanne, the realtors obviously play a huge role in this city, always have. And in part, you are creating an environment within which you attract businesses, you know, on the commercial front, obviously. What is it that you see representing realtors? What is it that you see as the areas for growth in the District of Columbia? And collectively, what are the realtors prepared to do to facilitate that?
I'd love to talk about that. And just to let you know, my background is in residential real estate, so I do work with homeowners in neighborhoods. I also work with developers on the residential side. And I would also like to say that it's much easier, I'm sure, to be a post-recession president of the Realtor Association than it was a couple of years ago. We're in a very good position right now. DC is a very hot real estate market. There have been several national press articles recently about DC being a market to watch. And, you know, when we have a healthy market, that attracts people to this area. And we've certainly seen in the growth of the census that DC is an attractive area for people to live. People are tired of commuting long distances. And as the city improves in terms of services and amenities, people want to live in the District of Columbia. The benefits of homeownership in the District of Columbia, you know, aside from the social benefits of people investing in their communities, real estate is a huge revenue source for the District of Columbia, as I'm sure you're well aware when you were figuring out your budget. And you know, we want to keep the revenue dollars in DC and promote homeownership in the District of Columbia.
What is it that the realtors can do to help us attract more businesses to the city? And obviously, as people who are involved in office buildings, you would want that, you would share that goal, I'm sure.
Absolutely. Well, even on the residential side, you know, when I sell a home to somebody, what's the first thing you do when you buy a home? You run over to your big box store, get your new sheets, your new, you know, go to Home Depot, get some paint, hire a painter. You know, you talked about green building. My neighbor's putting solar panels on his roof. I mean, there's just by creating housing and encouraging housing in the homeownership in the District of Columbia, we're creating jobs.
Curtis, you represent one of the biggest companies in America, in Coca-Cola. And I buy a lot. I love Coca-Cola.
Thank you, sir.
I love Pepsi too, by the way. But what is it that Pepsi can contribute? Pepsi.
Well, that's an easy question to answer. Nothing.
just playing, guys. What is it that Coca-Cola can contribute to the growth of this economy? And what is Coca-Cola's perspective on growth opportunities in the city for business?
Well, I'd like to return to something that Dr. Guthrie hit upon, and that is this issue of green-friendly policy, sustainability, if you will. As you look at not only us as a manufacturer and a distributor of a consumer goods, but when you look at other manufacturing concerns, the type of investment that's being made on an increasingly large basis around sustainable products, whether it's HFC-free coolers, whether it's hybrid vehicles, of which we have approximately 30 to 40 here servicing customers in the District of Columbia, those are all critical areas where I think it is highly conceivable that the district can massage a strategic advantage, if you will. Again, as Dr. Guthrie alluded to, there's a lot of soil to be tilled in encouraging more sustainable investment, more sustainable technology and the application thereof here in the District of Columbia. When you look at the open spaces and the parks that our small jurisdiction, our small geography enjoys, whether it's the untapped resource that is the Anacostia River, these are all critical assets that have been neglected for a wide array of reasons, but if they're leveraged in the right way, whether it's through increased waterfront development, and we've heard about amazing things that continue to happen as we look at the southeast-southwest waterfront, those, I think, are leverage points that could be tremendous areas of strength for the District of Columbia, and that's what we see when we look at this marketplace. It continues to be vibrant. It continues to be competitive. There's no doubt about that. But when you look at sustainability, I would also say, again, putting Dr. Guthrie back in the spotlight, when we talk about education and research here in the District of Columbia, we have a very vigorous university community. Everyone knows that. Everyone understands that. But it can continue to grow and thrive and attract more businesses and more entrepreneurial activity with the research and academic activity as the city continues to be more supportive.
You know, you mentioned something in your answer that I want to go back to, and that is the Anacostia River. It's interesting to me, and we've made some efforts to try to clean it up. I see Tommy Wells sitting up there, who really has been very involved. I've been delighted to be involved in, helping to generate some resources through this bag tax to help clean up the river. But it's interesting, the perception, and I talk about this a lot, the perception is when you go to London, for example, the Thames River is a unifying entity, a unifying resource. Go to Paris, the Seine River is the same. Here, the Anacostia River is considered to be a divider. It's east of the river or west of the river. It doesn't unify. It is a way of describing a different way of life, depending upon which side of the river that you're talking about. From an economic perspective, how do we begin to address that? And you can start, and I'd love to hear from some of the rest of you, because some of the most challenging and daunting economic challenges in the city are reposed in Wards 7 and 8. And I say that, frankly, as a resident of Ward 7.
Sure. With respect to the Anacostia River, I mean, it has most certainly been used as a metaphor for a lot of different things, and you hit that right on the head. But I think the critical starting point, and many organizations, some of which are represented here in the room, have made it their life's work, their mission to talk precisely about this issue. And the issue that I'm alluding to is you have to make the case that the Anacostia River is not just a Ward 8 river. It's not just a Ward 7 river. Quite frankly, it's not just a District of Columbia river. There are tributaries that flow from Prince George's County, from Montgomery County. We have to begin thinking about the river and other green resources as precisely that, regional, collective, public resources that we all must band around. Most certainly, organizations like DC Appleseed, which will be releasing a report soon on the Anacostia River, will help to continue that clarion call, the work that you alluded to of Councilmember Wells and other members of the council. It's critical that we all understand if the river fails, this city ultimately will continue to struggle.
It is failing. It is failing, and it's been failing for a very long time. The question for me, though, is how do we, in a reasonable period of time, begin to use it as a resource rather than being viewed as a moat, as it is now.
Understood.
And it's not just for you to answer. Let me ask some of the other folks also. John, I know your background is in healthcare, And frankly, there are a lot of healthcare issues that are associated with the Anacostia River and what is east of the Anacostia River. I wonder if you have any perspectives on that.
Well, I think Chet certainly touched on it. There's clearly east of the Anacostia, I'd add, in addition to HIV, diabetes is running at epidemic levels in the district. I think part of that has to do with access to care, particularly preventative medicine. I think it speaks to the importance of keeping United Medical Center a viable healthcare organization serving that part of the population, but I think there's much more work to do. I think certainly the two largest employers in the District of Columbia, I believe, are the university healthcare systems and then hospitals, aside from the federal government. So I do believe that there are tangible ways to make investments both in healthcare. You had mentioned in an earlier meeting about some new clinics that were opening in D.C., providing those opportunities for those residents to access healthcare services, not just when they need the emergency room, but when they need primary and preventative care and preventative medicine. On the education side, I believe that we're still dealing with there's been certainly a temporary reprieve, but the issue with nursing shortages, with shortages in pharmacy, in physical and occupational therapy, these are key clinical areas that we really need to see a new set of enrollment, and that can start as early as we wish. So I think those are some tangible ways to invest east of the Anacostia River in a way that's both going to reduce costs by providing better care to those residents and also provide them a little bit of a better future. Healthcare is a great future. It is certainly growing. The population that's going to require those services are going to be there, and I think that's an important strategy.
What is it that, and I throw this out to any of you that want to answer, what is it that has essentially stymied investment in 25% of the geography of the city, which is, what Ward 7 and 8 represent? 140,000 people live in those two wards. There's disposable income. What happens, unfortunately, is that people who live in those two wards often go to Prince George's County. They often go to Montgomery County, and they go out to Pentagon City to spend their money. So it's a lost opportunity in the city. I often say to people in Ward 7, we just doubled, the number of sit-down restaurants that we have from 1 to 2. In this area of the city, that you go from block to block. There's 4 or 5 restaurants on a block. And I cite that only as an example of the disparity that we have in the amenities that are available to people. What is it this time is investment? We got large companies sitting up here. We got realtors. We got, people who run business schools in the city. We've got healthcare leaders. We got banks. Collectively, you all ought to be able to have an answer to that. So what is the answer?
I would love to talk to that. I think, as you mentioned, there are significant perception problems that people who may have never crossed the river have an idea of what it's like over there. I deal very much on a neighborhood by neighborhood basis. When I had the opportunity to appoint presidential appointees to our board of directors, I made it a point to have realtors who are working east of the river on that board, as well as on our public policy committee, so we could hear their side of things. When people complain about a lack of affordable housing in the District of Columbia, I'm sorry, they may not be able to buy a 7-figure house in Ward 3, but there is lots of housing in the District of Columbia that is affordable. And we as realtors on the very ground level, very neighborhood level, promote those neighborhoods. We have is Darren here? Darren Davis here? We have a realtor that's working in Ward 7 and 8 that he's gotten Ward 7 and 8 on HGTV. I think he's one of my few Facebook friends that has maxed out his 5,000 Facebook friends because he creates this energy around that area that people want to, that are attracted to. He promotes what is good about the areas that he lives in, and that makes people want to live there.
How do we change the perception? And I think there's some truth in what you said. There are perceptions of what it means about that particular area of the city. Some of it has maybe some historical accuracy. Much of it is wrong at this stage. How do we change that perception, which it seems to me would be good for the city, good for the government, good for business, good for the residents? I can make a case for it being good for virtually everybody who cares about the District of Columbia. So how do we change that perception, Chad?
I think I just really want to echo Susan's sentiments in terms of looking at the city in reference to neighborhoods, because when you're in the business of addressing health disparities like I am, you quickly see that there's really no such thing as east of the river, because health disparities are rampant and also in Ward 1 and Ward 5, and so that's when we don't mention those part of the city, we just think that it's east of the river in Ward 7 and 8, but that's really not the case. So we need to really look at everything in reference to neighborhoods. And so when everything falls into place, when banks invest in projects, when the vocational schools are training everyone, when we have manufacturing producing gadgets and products, at the end of the day, it really comes down to your workforce and whether or not the workforce is healthy or not. And in terms of what can we do, we have to build on what the District of Columbia has already been doing in terms of increasing not access, but really increasing the understanding and health education of everyone in the District of Columbia, so that when they come to work, they are productive, they're ready to work, they're healthy, they don't have a headache, and they're ready to really produce. When we have quality products, whether that's in a service or with products, then we will make sure that the business that is started up is able to be sustained in the District of Columbia. So I think that we should maybe look at it in a different way in terms of really focusing on the workforce and not just east of the river, but in various neighborhoods.
But there are folks who would say that the problems are disproportionately experienced east of the river, that unemployment is disproportionately high, that health indices on the side of pathology disproportionately high, that the presence of amenities in the communities, absence, I should say, disproportionately high. So I think, there are people who would make the argument that we should focus on east of the river because it really has been cheated in the city. And the city, by not doing that, whoever the city may be in this instance, has really engaged in lost opportunities.
It's a catch-22 because I live in Ward 7, and so when you look at Ward 7 and east of the river, you also have in Ward 7 some of the most highly paid persons that live in the District of Columbia, some of the people that are more in your high income bracket, some of your more healthy individuals that have access to the best health care also. So again, it's in terms of looking at the perception is based on the division of the river. If we look at things in neighborhoods, like Susan just mentioned, then we will decrease the perception. For outside people that have never been to the District of Columbia, Ward 7 and 8 will now be more attractive because there's not this perception that Ward 7 and 8 is just this blighted area of the District of Columbia.
Okay, and I agree with you. I completely, you guys, how do we change that perception? How do you get people to think differently about an area of the city that's 25% of our geography? 140,000 people. Doug?
So I want to just give one more example of a city that did do this successfully in terms of changing perception. The city of Cleveland in the 1980s suffered similarly to a lot of other cities in the northern manufacturing industrial belt. And in 1982, McKinsey came in with a report that really pushed forward Cleveland Tomorrow. That was the business organization's community, the business community's organization that really drove forward a kind of local economic nationalism of investment in Cleveland, but it wouldn't have worked with Cleveland Tomorrow alone. That same year, the Ford Foundation funded an organization called the Local Initiative Support Corporation that then funded 50 community development corporations around the city that then became this very lively intersection of public-private partnerships in which you had the banks with the local development tax credit. You had corporations investing, and you had community development corporations actually taking ownership of that process. And when the entire community actually got excited about and really enlivened around the redevelopment of resources in that area, I think you had a very, very exciting time for economic development.
What was the key dynamic that changed the course?
I think the key dynamic was leadership from the corporate sector, and from the local nonprofit sector, and with some funding from the philanthropic world. And when you brought those three resources together and then had leadership from the government really pushing this forward, I think it just changed the entire dynamic. And I think we have the opportunity to do that.
You know what's interesting in your answer? I didn't hear government anywhere. And maybe there's some truth to that. The question that we continue to grapple with, what is the role of government in all of this? And you said the corporate sector, you said the philanthropic sector, and you said the nonprofit sector, none of which really is directly a part of government. So what is the role of government in making this happen?
Well, there's definitely a role of government in there, because if you think about what happened with Cleveland, there was a lot of CDFIs, the Community Development Financial Institutions, that were created, and they focused on specific areas within Cleveland. I actually used to work for KeyBank, who's headquartered in Cleveland, and for their Community Development Corp, so somewhat familiar with what was happening in that Cleveland realm. And there's a lot of places that's tried to mimic it, but if you look at Ward 7 and Ward 8, which in Ward 8 we actually have a branch, and we'd love for it to be more successful, we really look at it and say, how do you look at the businesses that are there? And how do we ensure that the businesses that already exist there, I think that's the starting point, is really working with what the assets that exist there and leveraging them. Making sure that we put something in place to help them. You know, there's a lot of them that are struggling. There's a lot of them, you know, that lack resources. And it's not just capital, but other resources that really can be pooled to really help those businesses become more successful. I think the first thing we have to do is help stabilize the ones that exist, and that's going to have a huge impact. When I think about areas and having toured DC when I first got here a year and a half ago, that wasn't on the tour schedule.
I wonder why.
So I think one simple thing
that perception that exists.
I think that speaks to the perception. You know, as a person that was coming in, you know, from the Baltimore area and then originally from upstate New York, you know, the Ward 7, Ward 8, and it was like, okay, so you really don't go in those areas. You know, and then obviously we have a branch in Ward 8, so I eventually went into Ward 8, and it's like, well, wait a minute, it's not.
How long did you stay?
No, we got a branch there. So.
I'm just kidding.
You know, so it's not what, if you haven't been and you're coming from outside of the area, and I'm a person who's grown up in urban areas, so it doesn't impact me the same way, but somebody who hasn't grown up in an environment like that, and the first impression you get is like, this is not on the tour schedule. These wards you don't really want to go into. Unfortunately, that instills the perception. You know, but when I look at it, you know, but getting back to how do we help change it, I think the government has a role, and a lot of times it's the Small Business Administration that plays a role in help creating these CDFIs. And I think the SBA has to play a role in creating the CDFIs and helping to fund them.
Chet?
I agree with that. It's interesting. We serve 40,000 employer groups. 80% of them are employers of less than 10.
Right.
And so much of the vibrancy of any economy is what's happening in the small employers. Many of them are tech, professional, services oriented. And I myself once started a business as a first employee. No government ever helped. But I just came back from a Midwestern city where they were talking about government even as the convener, brought parties together, created a framework, helped guide through all of the myriad of government requirements and permits and other things that oftentimes stymie the development of local business. And they set the framework. They brought the parties together, they introduced the parties, and then when they discovered obstacles, they helped remove those obstacles. And that truly stimulated growth. And the other thing that's striking is that, particularly in Ward 7 or Ward 8, anywhere in the city, of reaching in to the high schools, even with internship programs. I just came back from a discussion last night with a foundation that said they had been doing this in places very much like Ward 7 and Ward 8, and encouraging high school students to finish high school, in fact paying for some of their, this was business doing this, paying for some of their education beyond that, teaching them the high-tech areas, which kids are naturally drawn to anyway, web-based, this and that, software, reaching in and stimulating that. If you put those ideas together, if the district said, we will be the convener, we will see this as a central objective, we'll bring the nonprofits and the for-profits and the community organizations and look at what little businesses are in the area and help them prosper. That could help a lot.
That's a nice segue to a question I want to pose to each of you, and that is, I want you to identify one strength, and I guess the disadvantage is if you're last in this string of people, right? I want you to identify one strength and one obstacle that you think is the strength that we need to build upon to expand economic development citywide, and what is one obstacle that you see that needs to be swept away in order to be able to facilitate that. Dr. Foreman, we'll start with you.
Well, I wanted to go back to, in terms of what you asked the question, in terms of what is the role of government. And I know that the District of Columbia does an excellent job in terms of utilizing and supporting community-based organizations to foster grassroots efforts to help engage the community to, again, make a healthy workforce. So that's healthy in terms of the type of training that they receive, healthy in terms of increasing their access to health education, and making sure that there is a liaison between the grassroots community and community-based organizations that can work together to increase the workforce. So the government is already doing an excellent job with that. I think one of the strengths that we do have is the support of the District of Columbia to see the value of grassroots efforts and community-based organizations and continue to invest in health programs like the Live Well DC programs. And I think the only obstacle that we have is that we're not glorifying that. We're not talking about
one obstacle that needs to be swept away.
One obstacle that needs to be swept away is to decrease the perception that the District of Columbia is not healthy. We have the lowest uninsured rate, or doesn't have access to health care, because we have the lowest uninsured rate in the nation. So I think in terms of we just decrease that perception that we don't have healthy people that are ready and willing to work, then it will help to make sure that investors know that there's a workforce ready and viable and ready to work here.
Antoine, one strength, one obstacle.
I think one of the strengths that I've seen being a lifelong Washingtonian is that, and this is the administration that I've seen, and particularly yours, is being open to ideas. I think 10 years ago it was, we know better than you, so don't worry about it. We'll tell you what you're going to do. These types of forums where I've actually seen conversations that this administration has had and implemented, I think is critically important, because you need people need to know that you hear them. So I think that's a strength that we need to continue. The one weakness, quite honestly, is the streamlining. It is too hard to do business here. We got to streamline the process of doing business.
What? Be more specific.
I'll give you an example. The licensing, being able to get a
license
license to do business here, being able to.
So that would be like DCRA?
DCRA.
And Nick is here.
We go through the DCRA process. We go through the qualification process, particularly for CBEs, and that's gotten actually better. The more we can put online, the better off. And I think that's actually, particularly, we mentioned earlier about the small businesses. Well, when they want to do business and they look at the process, they'll say, I don't want to do that. It's too hard. It's too hard. And if we actually are able to address that, you'll actually be able to address particularly some.
Are we running people out of the city or foreclosing them from coming into the city because that kind of obstacle?
Oh, so yeah, certainly. I've talked to small businesses and I'm saying, why do you want to do this? I don't want to go through. Why do they want so much information? There's fear. It's fear.
Suzanne?
I think I totally agree. I'm all for the grassroots efforts. We have very strong community associations. I wanted to put in a plug-in for Main Streets organizations, which I think are a tremendous tool for, they've gotten H Street off the ground. They're helping, I live in the North Capitol Corridor. They're doing tremendous things there. And I think it's really important to energize our residents and have them be excited about living in the District of Columbia, which brings in more excitement. But I also, I've definitely run into those issues with the developers that I work with. I got a call on a vacant property issue this morning, where somebody had applied for condo docs and could not go forward because of some of the legislative issues that we've worked on over the past year. But I think this issue of perceptions of specific neighborhoods is really important. I do think that that's currently a weakness, but I think we could turn it around and make it, do some branding and marketing and make it a strength.
Doug, from the perspective of a business school in the city, one strength, one weakness.
So our greatest strength, I think, is that the Washington, D.C. is a national symbol. It cannot be the case that the D.C. economy is as distressed as it is, and I think you can leverage that to actually get a little leeway with the federal government to be very attractive to investors, and particularly foreign investors. If you take, for example, the case of Huawei, which was recently, the deal that they were trying to buy 3Leaf was recently shut down by the federal government. These guys need a presence in Washington, D.C., if only because they need to change the perception of themselves as a global corporation. There's a current account balance sitting over there on $2 trillion of U.S. treasuries that need to make their way back into the U.S. economy. And you have an opportunity, I think, to, just because we are D.C. and because companies need to have a presence here from around the world, and because it has to be such a national symbol, I think that there's an opportunity to make very bold arguments that people and mayors of other cities can't necessarily make. The obstacle, I would, to get a little abstract here, and I apologize, but I think that there is just the collective action problem of capitalism. I think that we don't push our business leaders enough to think about what it means to, all things being equal, they should be here. They should be helping businesses here. And I think you said a few minutes ago that you asked what the government's role is, and I love the idea of the government as convener. The government is the bully pulpit. The government is the case, that is the organization that can make the case that this is what we have to do because it's right. And so I think that obstacle, without that kind of argument, the obstacle is just the fact that capital will flow where it's cheapest to flow, and that's not where we want it to go.
John, I'm going to give you the last word on this.
Okay. Well, I guess I'll start with maybe the weakness first, if that's okay. The one consistent theme that I hear when I talk to some employees or team members that don't live in the district, one of the reasons they say they don't live in the district is because they want to live in an area that has a public school system that they feel comfortable with. And I know that we've been on that journey, and I think that is a really critical journey to continue. When families have a school system they believe in, I think that does promote not only families but businesses to either relocate or come back to places like the district. I mean, just speaking as a father for a moment, even I live in the district, my kids go to public school, even thinking about private school I can imagine would be very difficult for a large number of the people that work in healthcare. And so I think that's an important driver. I also think, I appreciate, Mayor Gray, you mentioning the fact that the hospitals employ 30,000 people in the 17 hospitals that are part of DCHA. I do think that healthcare is a significant driver in a couple ways. We touched a little bit on research. We have NIH in our backyard. We have Georgetown University. We have George Washington University. We have some world-class centers of excellence that the more investment we make there, I think the better the reputation of the district becomes and the more professionals that we get to this area. So I'd continue to focus on that as a true area of growth.
Thank you. I actually think we're at the end of our time, and I really regret that, because I think we could go on for another couple of hours and it would be quite productive. I want to thank all 8 of you for being a part of what I think was a really robust and stimulating discussion, and not only individually but collectively. And I guess I'd recommend to the Chamber that you continue to do this, and maybe on an even more frequent basis, and maybe expand the time that we have available for this kind of discussion. Very helpful to me. I would love to be a part of this and continuing. And we'll bring Victor Hoskins next time. We'll bring Nick again. We'll bring Antonio Hunter. All of the folks who really, I think, can be helpful with this. And I think the idea of being a convener makes perfect sense because, you know, you talk about job creation, but governments typically don't create jobs. I think the government has to provide an environment within which people feel good about coming to do business, and then make sure we build on the strengths and sweep away obstacles like permitting and licensing and other disincentives that encourage people to go elsewhere. So I ask you to give the panel a big hand for their participation today. And now I want to turn it back over to the chairman of the board, Gina Adams.
Let's give our mayor a big round of applause. Fantastic, fantastic. That was a great exchange. Thank you all for being here. I think we have time for just a couple of questions. You should have received a little white card at the registration. If you have a question, if you'd write it down, hopefully you've written some already, and you can pass them along to the staff that'll be on the aisle. If you need a card, then please raise your hand, and we're going to try to do this quickly. I think we're a little bit behind on time. So let me begin with the first question, and I'll pose it to our mayor. And we've been talking about this a little bit. The hospitals make up a large and crucial portion of our healthcare system, yet like many of the city's other providers, all of us have suffered from a number of funding cuts and assessments in recent years. How do you think these financial setbacks have impacted the district's ability to provide care to its residents and ensure the health of our communities?
Well, there's no question that we have been in a recessionary environment now for well into 3 years, and it has impacted every sector of the District of Columbia. I suppose the good news is that in this budget, the upside is that we actually have gotten some additional revenue that we will invest. We've got $105 million new dollars that we will invest, and frankly, the lion's share of that will go into education, because I agree with John. Everybody, all boats will rise if we make those investments. More people will want to live here. More companies will want to be here because it's an indigenous workforce, and it will inherently improve the quality of life. At the same time, I recognize that we've asked the healthcare industry, we've asked virtually every industry to contribute to keeping the city vital and viable. And there will be more of that in the next budget. The upside is that I believe that we are on the backside of this recession, and I think when we get to fiscal year 13, we're going to see our ability to improve our investments, and healthcare is obviously one, for me anyway, that I want to invest more in. We've invested, and it was a key point that was made, we've invested a lot in healthcare coverage, but we haven't invested enough in healthcare access. And you've got people who are sitting with insurance in some parts of the city who don't have any healthcare system in their midst at all.
Okay, thank you. I've gotten a few questions like this, so I'll ask it. With the lowest rate of individuals without health care insurance, why does the District of Columbia have the highest rates of death due to chronic disease such as HIV/AIDS, cancer, hypertension, etc.?
Well, I'll start, and others can jump in. First of all, not to be defensive, but I wonder when you say the highest rate, who are we being compared to? Because a lot of other cities have high rates as well. But that notwithstanding, I think it goes back to the issue that I mentioned earlier, and that is we have very uneven access to health care services in the city. I think it was John that mentioned it's important, and I agree with him, that we keep the United Medical Center operational, be it in the private sector or public sector. But after you get past that hospital, the best you have is a patchwork set of health care services on the eastern end of the city. We are now building a new clinic to replace the W Street clinic. That'll be on Galen Street and will double the number of patient visits annually that can be made. We are committed to a healthcare facility, a primary care facility in Parkside, which of course is in Ward 7. Another one on South Capitol Street. Until we build a healthcare system, which I want to work on, which I am committed to emphasizing, we will continue to talk about that strange phenomenon, and that is we got all these people with healthcare insurance and we got all these healthcare problems. Again, we have to recognize that having healthcare insurance is just simply a passport to a service. For many of our people, they don't have a service to access.
Did you want to say something?
Just a couple quick points. I certainly agree with the mayor on all of his points. I think it's important that the healthcare system in the District of Columbia, obviously, hospitals across the country are they're in a precarious position. There are stagnant Medicare rates. There are growing numbers of enrollees in the Medicaid platform across the country, and I think that is putting some real pressures on cost and on new and innovative ways of thinking. So I think it's a real challenge, but it's also a real opportunity. One of the strategies that we have at MedStar Health is really focusing on programs and services that don't need to be on our hospital campuses, that make it more convenient for patients to access our services, but also provide the level of services that they need without getting to the hospital environment. So I think there's some opportunities while we understand and better analyze and listen to the healthcare reform debate and what comes out of that. I certainly believe there are some real opportunities to receive pilot funding or demonstration project funding to look at some of these diagnostic groups, because I do think chronic heart failure, diabetes, these are a large percentage of healthcare costs, to Chet's earlier point. If we can, as a healthcare system, and that would include payers and hospitals alike, if we can provide better access to those services in a preventative way. The medical home model is one area that has worked in other environments that we've been piloting in various settings. I know at the hospital center. I believe there are a number of ways for us to be able to work together, both from the district government and from the private healthcare sector.
Maybe just to build and strengthen on that very point, I don't think you need to think so much about building more hospital-centric services, and I didn't think you said that, but you touched on something that I think makes total sense, which is more primary care medical home, office-based practice. The technology better enables it. We are putting a tremendous emphasis on that, providing more reimbursement for that, and there are ways, I think, for the public and private sector to work together to foster it. Putting more of that in Ward 7 and 8 would help tremendously. Maybe one other thing, there's so many problems entwined with so many others, but a lot of times, and I think you touched on this early, if you look at those wards and other parts of the city, it's very hard to get access to healthy food. I mean, what you have is fast food.
Yes.
You have McDonald's, you have things of that nature. We have a little booklet that we put out that lists the menus of all the fast food restaurants, and that are listed green, yellow, red, orange as to what is good for you and what is not. You have menus filled with red. It says if you eat this, you're eating high fat, high calories, high salt, and that is what is oftentimes the most readily available food substance. And these things are not easy to fix, but it leads to obesity, heart disease, and so on. It's not just having more care providers, it's what else are the other alternatives available, and how do you foster that?
You know, and bringing diversified healthcare services to other parts of the city also brings economic development and business. It brings jobs, and it brings other businesses to those areas of the city.
I just really want to mention that, but we are underutilizing one of our most accessible resources, health resources that are available now, and that's the community pharmacist. When we think about the community pharmacist, we usually think about the person that's in the white coat, but we don't really understand that the community pharmacy is, with public-private partnerships, is putting together innovative programs such as the Pharmacy Advisor Program to help educate patients to secure the gap when, for example, if a diabetic patient receives diabetic care, but they're not receiving medications that's reflective of the guidelines. With CVS Pharmacy, the pharmacist calls the doctor to make sure that the person is on a statin, such as Lipitor, or is also on a blood pressure medication to protect their kidneys. And we are not accessing the most accessible healthcare professional and looking at the expanded role of the community pharmacist, which is who is already right there.
Thank you. One final question, and we've spent a lot of time talking about wards 7 and 8. We've got fantastic questions up here on the podium that unfortunately we do not have time to address, so I'll ask this one. The mayor has alluded to it a little bit, but let me ask it more specifically, and it is, how can we have meetings like these in wards 7 and 8?
I think you schedule them. And
there you go.
Tell you, there is not an absence of opportunity to do that.
Let's schedule it.
If you think about the Anacostia Library, if you think about the renamed, Benning Library, which is the Dorothy Irene Height Library, if you think about the Deanwood Community Center, which there's no facility like that in the region, let alone the District of Columbia. It has a library, rec center, aquatic center, senior center, and early childhood education program under one roof. We will be finishing the H.D. Woodson High School, which will be a STEM school. It will be opening in August. It will be absolutely fantastic and is being designed to be a community resource. You've got, Matthews Memorial Church on Martin Luther King Avenue. You've got the United Medical Center, which has wonderful meeting facilities. So there is not an absence of, facilities in which to host meetings, but there has to be the will and the commitment to do it.
All right. Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you to our sponsors and our fantastic panelists. Let's give them another round of applause.